The check was for $43. That's what Derek Okafor sent his ex-wife for the month of September. $43 for 3 children, a mortgage he'd walked away from, and 11 years she'd spent building a life out of whatever he left behind. His attorney set it on the counsel table like it was evidence of good character. Derek sat next to him with his arms crossed and a look on his face like a man who had never once been told no by anything that mattered. Renata Okafor saw the check from across the room and said nothing. She had learned a long time ago how to swallow things whole. She sat at the opposite counsel table in a gray blazer she'd ironed the night before. Her oldest, Marcus Jr., had watched her do it from the kitchen doorway, 16 years old and already carrying something in his eyes that no 16-year-old should be carrying, and she had her hands folded in her lap where nobody could see them shake. She had 3 folders organized by year. She had receipts. She had a school lunch account balance from 2022 that read -$11 because she'd forgotten to transfer funds the same week her transmission went out. She had brought everything because when you have been dismissed your whole life, you learn to prove every single thing you say. Derek Okafor, by contrast, had brought a lawyer who billed $450 an hour and a brand new watch. This was not the first time Renata had stood in a courtroom asking for what the law had already said she was owed. She had been here twice before, twice in 3 years, with 2 different judges, 2 different orders, 2 different versions of the same promise that something would change. Nothing changed. Derek restructured. Derek relocated assets. Derek's attorneys filed motions that turned every hearing into a maze. She had to find her way through alone while working the morning shift at Presbyterian Hospital and helping her youngest with 3rd grade reading every night after dinner. She was 41 years old and she looked like someone who had been running for a long time without being allowed to stop. Judge Vonda B reviewed the $43 check without touching it. She had been reviewing the full file for the past 7 minutes, silently, deliberately, the way a person reads something they want to fully understand before they speak about it. The 255th Judicial District Court sat still around her. The court reporter waited. The bailiff stood by the door. In the gallery, 2 women who appeared to be Renata's sisters were gripping each other's hands in the second row, and neither of them was breathing at full capacity. Derek Okafor's attorney began his opening position. He spoke about Derek's recent business expenses, a logistics company expansion into 3 new markets, startup costs, operational overhead, the classic language of a man who has learned that complexity is its own kind of armor. He used the word encumbered 4 times. He said Derek was committed to co-parenting in good faith. He mentioned that Derek had sent a check in September as evidence of that commitment. Judge Vonda B let him finish. Then she said, "Counsel, what is the court-ordered monthly support obligation?" "Your Honor, given the current financial, what is the number in the order?" A pause. $3,400. She held up the check, "and you brought me 43." Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The air in the courtroom had changed into something with weight. "Mr. Okafor," Judge Vonda B set the check down and looked at Derek directly. Not his attorney, not the file, Derek. And Derek, for the first time since he walked in, uncrossed his arms. "I've read this file. I have read it. I know about the 2022 arrears. I know about the lapse in health insurance that put your youngest daughter in an emergency room in August of last year." She let that sit for exactly 1 second. "I know about the lunch account. I know about the car." She looked at him the way a person looks at something that has been trying to hide. "I also know about the Frisco property, the one that isn't listed in your financial disclosure." Derek's attorney turned to Derek. Derek looked at the table. "I want to be very clear about what happens in this courtroom," Judge Vonda B said, and her voice was so calm it was almost gentle, except for the thing underneath it that was not gentle at all. "This is not a negotiation. You had an obligation to 3 children. You had 11 years of a woman covering what you refused to cover, and you have come into the 255th with $43 and an attorney who is very good at making $43 sound like a complicated situation." She paused. "It is not complicated. You built something. She built something too. The difference is hers had 3 people in it who needed to eat. Renata made a sound she hadn't planned on making. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of sound that comes out when something you've been holding for a long time finally gets put down, not by you, but by someone else, someone with the authority to say, 'I see what this is. I see exactly what this is.'" Judge Vonda B heard it. She looked at Renata for one moment, just one, and gave her the smallest nod. Not performance, recognition. The ruling came in four parts. Full arrears calculated to the dollar, a structured payment plan with automatic garnishment attached, a contempt finding for the undisclosed asset, and a requirement that Derek's financials be reviewed quarterly for the next 2 years. His attorney stood to object to the garnishment, and Judge Vonda B said, "Simply sit down, counsel," and he did. Derek Okafor left the 255th owing $112,000. Renata left with the court order, her 3 folders, and her hands for the first time in 3 years completely still. Some men spend a decade building an empire on the foundation of a woman they left behind, and one day she walks into the right courtroom